Make Eco Art, das ist der Titel der jetzt kommenden Keynote des Medienkünstlers Joanie Lemercier. Und es wird hier in gewisser Weise auch um seine persönliche Entwicklung im Umgang zum Beispiel mit Krypto-Kunst gehen. Damit hat er selbst auch mal experimentiert, hat also selber auch mal digitale Kunstwerke über diese Technik der Non-Fungible Token oder auch NFTs in die Blockchain eintragen lassen, um sie dann als Unikate auszuweisen und zu verkaufen. Er hat sich dann aber im Anschluss recht viel mit dieser Technik zum Beispiel beschäftigt, die ja wegen des hohen Stromverbrauchs auch sehr umstritten ist, und hat sich dann auch wieder davon abgewendet. Mittlerweile ist er Teil der Bewegung der Extinction Rebellion und setzt sich auch in seiner Arbeit viel und stark mit Fragen des Umgangs mit der Umwelt auseinander. Und ich würde jetzt an dieser Stelle ins Englische wechseln, weil Joanie Lemerciers Keynote auch auf Englisch sein wird. Deutsche Übersetzungen finden Sie unten über so den Button DE. So I will switch to English now. Welcome, Joanie Lemercier. Great to have you here. So we were just talking about how you became part of the Extinction Rebellion movement, and that your concerns about environmental damage became quite a big part as well of your artistic work. And of course, one of the big questions is, how could post-fossil media art look like? Media art which is not damaging and which is at the same time communicating with our environment as well as it is communicating about its damages. And at that point, I would leave the stage to you to talk us about the various approaches you found. Just one last remark to the audience. We will have a moment in the end of the talk to get into a discussion, so it would be great if you would use the chat function down there on the screen to note down any question which comes up during the keynote, and we will discuss them then later in the end of the keynote. Thank you so much. So I'm very curious to listen to what you have to say.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm really excited to open the event and to be sharing my thoughts about how art and technology can evolve and maybe can help shape a better future in general. We're all, I guess, focused about the current state of the world, whether it's the current situation with the pandemics or the climate crisis. There's a lot of things, a lot of really worrying things around us. And I think as artists, it's a little bit our duty to try proposing solutions or inspiring people to do something about those crises. I must disclaim that this talk is new to me. Actually, my practice as an artist has evolved a lot in the past 3 years, and it's now very much related to coal mining in Germany. So I will try to share my background and my experience around those sort of activism and questions around climate, and also more like positive versions of the future, economic models. You mentioned NFTs, which is something I'm quite interested about. But yeah, beware, there's a lot in this talk. So I'm looking forward also to exchange with the audience later during the Q&A, because you might have a lot of questions. Even myself, I still have questions about some of the things I do. So discussions are really, really important. I just came back last night from Lützerath in NRW, and there's a big, it's called the sort of the front line of climate action. So I will tell you a little bit about this later on. But as an introduction, I'm going to try to cover the past 15 years of my practice around digital art. And to be honest, it all started almost as an accident. I was always interested in art. My mom was an art teacher when I was young, and she was teaching also computer graphics. So I started doing art and using computers when I was about 5 years old or 6 years old, and I never stopped. But my personal practice around light and projection started here in my bedroom. I was based in Bristol in England at the time, and I started using a video projector like a regular house projector, not to project a film on the screen, but rather project light onto objects. You will see a lot of my work over the past decade has been around that idea of light in space, projecting light onto objects, onto architecture and canvases. But it all started then. I did a small origami with paper, and I found it completely magical how with projection mapping, you can actually make that origami light up, even if it was generating its own light. So there's a sense of magic that I really like. So I started with this very simple structure, and then I started making more and more origamis. I've always been obsessed by geometrical patterns. Probably comes from my mom, because she was actually teaching design in a fashion school, and she was focusing mostly on how you make patterns for fabric to print clothes. And so I guess my obsession for patterns probably comes from my young age. Then quite quickly, I became interested in how I could use code and interactive programming to animate my projection. So I started, this is very simple. I move my mouse around, and then the mapping sort of evolves, so I can light up different parts of the sculpture just by moving my mouse. It's a bit of a gimmick, but this is sort of to explain how my practice is also based on code, computers, and technology in general, of course. But my mind is very much set onto this sort of open source programming language approach to arts. I did a lot of workshops with young people in schools and stuff, and making origamis and using projection was a very fun thing to do, and a very sort of straightforward way to teach projection mapping to young kids, and also to like architects and designers in schools. I did probably one of my first professional installation was at Club Transmediale in Berlin. That was in 2007, and I teamed up with Visomat. They were local artists and designers in Berlin. They designed this structure, which was made of styrofoam, and then I did the projection onto the sculpture. So it's very minimal, very simple. And this was pretty much the foundation of my practice based on these very minimal aesthetics. You might recognize the Tron aesthetics, and I will explain later how science fiction films and this sort of aesthetics from the 80s is still influencing my work today. Quite quickly, I met with other visual artists. They were also interested in leaving the screen and projecting in space. So we created a collective label called Anti-VJ, and we really wanted to avoid the sort of cheesy 3D effect of VJing at the time. VJing is a projection of an image behind the DJ, and you sort of follow the musician in the club, and this is how I started. So we used the name Anti-VJ as a joke because we were trying to get out of the screen, which is something I will come back to later. When you get out of the screen, then the entire world opens up to digital projection. You can actually do a projection of light onto a building, architecture, and also sculptures like you saw before. So very quickly with Anti-VJ, we were lucky enough to travel around the world. This is one of our early work in South Korea, in what was called the Smart City, New Songdo City. So it's a city that came out of nowhere. Basically, the South Korean authorities, they leveled the ground near the sea, and they extended the ground into the sea to create this city within 5 years. It went from the sea into like a full-on city. The project didn't quite work. Like today, if you go to New Songdo, it's half empty. So it's smart cities may not be the future we are expecting. The entire idea of the city is to be based on technology. So our projection was about the relationship between a building architecture and the smart city and the technology. What if there's a glitch in the computer, a glitch in the machine, so your entire building then also has a glitch? Maybe you can't enter it anymore because your RFID doesn't work. So it was interesting for us when we were doing projections to think about the context, to think about the building, to create the artwork, as opposed to projecting random effects. This idea of really doing some research about the architecture came even bigger when we started working with heritage. When you project on a cathedral or on a church, or in this case in a castle in France, you really want to know what the history is about. So we used to do a lot of research, and we try to reflect on the history of the places, to bring some narratives, to bring maybe some sort of something that would echo the past, or at least would echo the architecture itself. We were very, very lucky with NTVJ back, this was 2009. We did this mapping on an organ in the Netherlands. And this was incredible to actually send some light onto the metal, the wood, and the stone of this location, because our work was in direct relationship with the history of the place. So I will tell about this later. Also, how heritage has such a strong importance for me in my work, also in my relationship to architecture and history. So doing projects in heritage, it means you would spend a night, sometime several days inside the building for the technical aspects. Because of course, when we started, there was no software for projection mapping. So we had to make our own software. We had to invent our own workflow because there were none available on the market. So it was pretty much incredible to spend the night in this cathedral. So then at the end of the project, you know exactly how many arches there are. You know exactly how the organ is made and created. And it sort of brings you back into the thoughts of maybe the makers of the organ 100 years ago. So the whole process is really fascinating to work with heritage. Very different building. This one is not very pretty. It's a big hotel in Miami. I was part of Art Basel Miami in 2015, and I did this big projection that you could see from all around the city. Again, based on geometrical patterns and as a reference to Victor Vasarely, which is one of the founders of the op art movement in the 70s. I will talk about this later, but I used to travel all around the world to do big projections requiring a lot of electricity. And it was great, it was exciting, but now my practice has shifted completely. But I thought this piece was quite representative of the sort of one-off event I try not to do anymore because of the carbon footprint. One interesting thing when you work with architecture, the main constraint is that you have to work with the existing building. You can't change the facade, or so it's a big constraint. So then came an idea of designing our own structures. So in this case, it's a project called Blueprint. It's about the geometry and the cosmos and the patterns that emerge from chaos. So it's a long audiovisual piece. Of course, everything I'm showing now is just GIFs. It's 2 or 3 seconds, so it doesn't really reflect the actual work. But I'm just like skipping through so to give you an idea of my background. But you can see longer versions of these works online on my website. But yeah, this piece was about creating a structure, designing a big object that would be the canvas for the projection. As I said, my work was always about leaving the screen, escaping the rectangular projection, because we have screens in our lives all the time. Our smartphones, our computers, when we go to the theater to watch a film, it's a big rectangular projection. So I've always tried to escape this, and the holy grail of escaping the screen is actually being able to project in mid-air, like this idea that sort of came from science fiction of the hologram, the light projected in space. So of course you can't project on nothing. So I've been working a lot on how to use water particles and a mist to actually reveal the rays of light that a projector sends out. So these were some early tests at my studio in Brussels. That's where I'm based right now. And I started also doing interactive projections. So then you can completely relate to the projection in a different way. You can actually go inside the image and you can control it with your body. And you can also, in this case here, I try to replicate a ghost of myself almost, and see how far I could push this sort of sci-fi idea that technology could escape the computer, escape the screen, etc. And earlier, like a couple of years ago, actually, this ended up being a new project called Brume, which is a projection in midair. It's very geometrical, but this shows the sort of the process from escaping the screen into like full-on 3D projections in the studio. This is also a trick with technology. I'm tracking the viewer's position. So for me, so this is like peak technology, because what you see feels completely 3D and completely sort of science fictional and futuristic. Yeah, this for me, this particular video shows that my research for the highest, the most impressive technology got me to this point. But then now I'm gonna start being a little bit critical about all this practice, because of course using digital tools involves consuming a lot of electricity, flying all around the world to festivals and events, and as we all know now, it's really not sustainable. And there was something very particular about my own practice, because at one point I felt like I was living inside a computer. What you see here is an image that was taken during a residency in England with Elliot Woods and Kyle MacDonald. And we were inside a big room with projections everywhere. And you can't do more immersive than this, because there's just pixels everywhere. There's no nature anymore. There's no reality. You are immersed into a virtual reality, which is fun. But also, I can see now how this could be very misleading and very bad as a vision of the future, because that I guess that's what Matrix, the 3 films were all about. All the humans were actually having visions of a reality that doesn't exist anymore. So I like this sort of funny analogy that you can find in science fiction. And here you can see a picture of us, myself and Kyle. In this room, we would spend an entire week on the floor working with the laptops. And that was fun, but it's a little bit dystopian now that I look at the pictures. And here you can see actually there was a crash. I think the computer crashed. There was a bug, so we were completely surrounded by the blue screens, and this was a little bit strange. So I'm going to leave behind the high-tech stuff, and now I'm going to discuss how feeling like too much inside the computer forced me to escape also the cities and trying to reconnect with nature. Most of the nature I was seeing at the time was through the airplane window. I would see amazing mountains, and I thought that was beautiful, but it was always very distant, and nature was almost inaccessible. So then I started changing my schedule. All the festivals I was working with and for, I asked them to extend my stay a little bit. So instead of going to South America for a week, I would try to stay for 2 or 3 weeks after the project, so I can see the nature. I could actually go into the wild, and I could, basically escape technology, because I was too much into coding and computers, and my entire life was in a box almost. And this is an interesting symbol for the life we live and our relationship to technology and nature. So I started going not just into nature, but into deserts, into very remote places, and trying to find like very peaceful environments, and actually appreciate the beauty of natural light. Because all my work is about light and projection, and actually reconnecting with natural elements was very important to me. I did this series of pictures at the Rodon Crater, which is a project created by a light artist, a visual artist called James Turrell. I think he's in his 80s now, and a long time ago he bought this crater in I think it's in Arizona, not Utah. But I went there a few years ago and I spent 3 days or 2 days and nights outside the crater, taking some pictures and, you know, having a slightly different relationship with time as well. When you stay somewhere for many hours, you see the light changing. And for me, this was very important because the work of Turrell is very inspiring to me. So that sort of, I spent actually 1 month in the desert at that time, and did a lot of experiments with sun, throwing dust into the air, into this volcanic crater. And yeah, it was, for me, it started being very important to sort of reconnect with nature. I have a small clip. I'll cut the sound because I'm gonna talk over it. But basically, I also took with me a drone. So I still had a little bit of technology. I can't fully escape it. So I had a drone to shoot those images, and also I had a little robot. It's a plotter drawing that you will see in a minute, and it helps me to draw on paper. You can see here this little machine. It never gets tired, so the machine can draw for like hours and hours and hours while I'm looking at it and while I'm looking at the nature. And for me, it's a very interesting collaboration between the machine, the computer, and the artist. So I went to a lot of volcanic landscapes as well. I did 3D scans. And already, like, seeing those slow images makes me slow down a little bit my voice pitch as well, because yeah, that's what it does when I'm usually in nature. So yeah, I'll skip the video, but you get an idea. I wanted to escape those immersive computers and to find myself in desertic areas. So I started representing nature a lot. Since I go on hikes, and there's a common point in all my works on representing nature. I'm always representing dry nature with no human beings or no living forms. And I realized then that I'm very, very influenced by the science fiction movies, and especially the dystopian movies from the 90s when I grew up. The landscapes of Mad Max, the horrible vision of the future like Waterworld, but also 2001 Space Odyssey, where the computer takes control. I think all this has created a really dark vision of the future, but I love these aesthetics, and it's been in my work for many, many years now. And also in digital art in general, there's a lot of black and white work, very geometrical and very sort of dry, which is fine, which I love, but, you know, it says something about my personal relationship to the living creatures and to the world in general. So I started capturing nature to try to bring it back into my projects. This was an early projection on a wall that I did in 2010. It's about the Icelandic volcano that maybe you remember erupted in Iceland, and all the planes were completely disrupted. And I was supposed to go on a residency, but my plane was also cancelled. So I ended up doing a piece about the volcano itself and about those great forces of nature that sort of remind us as artists that we, as artists and as citizens and people of the world, that maybe sometimes nature is bigger than us, and maybe we can't control everything, and things get out of control, which is interesting when you think about the pandemics or the climate change. We should really stay humble and realize that we cannot control everything with technology. Another amazing hike was on the top of Mount Fuji in Japan. I love hiking alone and to those extreme places. So it was the last day of the season for hikes. So it started being very, very cold, but it was just incredible to see that shadow casting over Japan for almost 100 kilometers. I think at night I could see the lights of Tokyo just behind the shadow, and this was just incredible. I was also inspired by that hike, and I did this piece called Fuji-san. And this is the silhouette of my producer, Juliette. We work together. And a lot of the pictures you did see will have the silhouette of Juliette. So yeah, this piece was about the volcano and well, about Mount Fuji, and also about a very old tale from the 10th century of Kaguya Hime, which was a princess. It's an old tale that every Japanese knows, and we thought it was very inspiring for us as a base for digital art. So again, more representation of nature. I try to also connect generative design and algorithms to landscapes and mountains. But it somehow felt strange to bring nature into a dark room, into a black box. So it's still something I'm thinking about and I'm considering, but showing nature while you destroy it by consuming technology is a bit of a weird stretch, if you see what I mean. So this is still something I do, but I try to be a bit critical about the actual impact of my projects. Those projects were also a chance for me to push into CGI renders. So I try to recreate nature with code, with algorithms, and so recreate another version of reality. So all you see here is fake. It's just made of numbers. Nothing is real. There's no texture from reality. Nothing comes from the real world here. It's only code and pixels. Okay, now it's going to be a weird transition. The previous image you saw is very dark. It's really a place you don't want to be because there's nothing there. Maybe the beauty of the landscape itself, of the terrain, the erosion is something quite beautiful. And I was quite shocked when I discovered the Ambar coal mine and the Garsweiler coal mine. I was shocked mostly because it's just outside Brussels. If you drive for an hour and 40 minutes, you get to this location, which really looks like the Mordor, I think is being mentioned very often. So yeah, maybe you know about the Ambar coal mine and the Garsweiler coal mine. I was very surprised when I discovered this place that no French person like me or people in Belgium ever heard of those incredible places. The Ambar coal mine with Garsweiler is actually the largest source of CO2 emissions in Europe. And it's right here in Germany, and so I was shocked just by the gravity of the situation and the fact that I wasn't aware, and so I couldn't do anything because I didn't know. So these are drone images I made of the Ambar mine. You can see how this sort of relates to my dystopian CGI renderings. Because it's as dark and as destructive. And what struck me the most when I first went there is the scale of it. The Ambar mine is 8 kilometers long and 5 kilometers wide. You can fit the entire island of Manhattan in it, including the buildings, because it's 400 meters deep. And it was so big for me that I couldn't quite believe this was a real thing. When you see those images, it feels like a very terrifying version of Mad Max. So this is a bagger. It's the largest machine on Earth, and there are like tens of those machines in Ambar and Garsweiler. So here is one, but actually when you look at a wider picture, you realize that they are actually, if you see my cursor here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, probably 10 in this single location, and they work 24/7. And this location generates a footprint of about 100 million tons of CO2 every year. What you see on the screen here, it's a little artwork I made, a little data viz. It's the real-time emissions of this location. So it's been 40 tons just in the past seconds, 50 tons, 60 tons. So yeah, I think the narratives we were given as citizens is that we should really reduce our own footprint by, you know, traveling less and eating less meat, and which definitely is something we should all do. I'm doing it myself. But maybe the priority would be to oppose the fossil fuel lobbies, because the only reason that those emissions are here is because the lobbies have been pushing to slow down renewables. So yeah, I think after discovering this location, I realized that maybe I was wrong for so long. Maybe the problem isn't taking shorter showers. Maybe the problem is RWE in Germany. Again, it's the single largest source of CO2 emissions in Europe. I think they should be outlawed. I think they should be sued, and I think they should be confronted to justice, because what they've been doing is just criminal. It's a bit strong. I'll explain why. So these are just pretty images, but I think the deeper problem is not just the CO2 emissions. It's also all the sort of side effects of the fossil fuel lobbies. This is a picture of the village of Immerat. There's not much left. Immerat, like 20 other villages, has been entirely destroyed. Houses have been razed. People are being expropriated. Communities are shattered, and there's a lot of violence from the states onto those people. So they take the money and leave their places. Even the cemetery of Immerat has been demolished, and the bodies have been excavated from the soil to be moved somewhere else. So this is not just a CO2 problem; it's also a social injustice problem, and the fact that only a few people, like I think it was Armin Laschet at the time, who was the head of NRV, and is pro coal, and I think is influenced. That's why. So he completely failed to mitigate climate change, and now we can see the floods in Germany. We can see all the destruction all around the world, and I think there are a few people that are responsible, and we should tell that story. Here is the Ambar forest. There are a lot of people also in Ambar, but also in Dani forest. So there are a lot of activists trying to oppose the destruction of the forest and trying to oppose the destruction of the churches and villages. As I explained earlier, my mapping work, my projection work really reconnected me to heritage and to architecture. And when I saw those images, it really broke my heart. And I'm not using those words lightly. I think my life has changed when I saw that a church from the past century, it was built in 1893. This is being demolished just for profit. If we want enough energy for everyone, there's no need to use coal. So there's no need to destroy those communities and those places. It's just a political choice to erase the memory of those communities and to erase those from the past, because there is money, just because there is money to be made. So on the top is a picture of Immerat 4 years ago. And on the bottom is a drone image I did myself in 2019. And again, I think seeing those two images next to each other really broke my heart. So I'm just telling this horrible story to explain why the future of my artworks and my digital art is informed by this story. But yeah, I'm a bit sorry to bring this horrible, gloomy story to this conference. This is the Church of Mannheim. All the houses you see on these pictures, they've been demolished already, and people have been pushed away. And this was the last mass, and a lot of people were crying because they were married in this church. So a lot of old people were in tears because RWE is taking their memories and taking their lives and crushing everything. Okay, so this is a recap. So I believe that the sort of dystopian future I was seeing in the 90s in films, it's actually happening, and it's actually happening just here in Germany, and not far from where we live. When you think about coal mining and coal power plants, I was sort of considering this as something from the past, but this is a map of the current coal power plants today. There are still 4 in France. There are many, like 13, I think, in Spain, and I don't know how many in Germany. But this is still very much a problem and everywhere. So, of course, this could have been replaced with like the proper political decisions, maybe a decade or 2 decades or 3 decades ago. But I think the politicians have failed to address this issue. And now the date for coal phase out is 2038, which, as we know, is a nonsense because the floods are increasing and there's too much damage and violence made to the global south as well. So we have to do something. So after this gloomy story, I'm gonna explain and tell how I reacted to this shock that I felt in Anbar. So first thing, of course, this coal is not, so it's mostly extracted for profit because it could be replaced by other energies, but also, of course, it generates electricity. A lot of electricity is wasted for the machines themselves and for the transport of electricity, but also we consume this electricity, and myself, I do as well. So the first thing for me to act was on an individual level. I looked at my energy consumption. It's really boring. I'm sorry, but I looked at all my electricity bills over the past 4 or 5 years, and I did a breakdown of my water consumption, electricity consumption, gas for heating, everything, all this. Just to understand, first, it's important to understand why we need so much electricity and energy. Then we can take decisions to reduce it, which I believe reduction is the reasonable path for the future. For me, it also meant stop traveling by plane and reduce travel in general. So it's a tough choice because I love travel. Everyone does, I guess. And I love also going to remote places. So stopping travel for me was a big deal. So I still travel by train, but I haven't flown I almost stopped for the past 2 years. I only took one single in 2019 and another single plane in 2020 and none in 2021. That's something I'm proud of. It's tough because my economic model was based on this. So here you can see the evolution of my consumption, and we pledged to lower the consumption by at least 10% every single day, every single year from now on. So as you can see, it's going quite well, moving from 9 megawatts in 2018 to about 6 megawatts last year. And it's a work in progress, but I believe this should be something we should start considering. So once you've done that, once you've say like a couple of megawatts, you haven't made any significant change on a larger scale. So what do we do then? And my choice was to help activists and to learn about activism. I'm very inspired, like Katja said, by the Extinction Rebellion, but also by Ende Gelände in Germany. They've been doing amazing work to slow down and stop the coal mining industry. So it's mostly symbolic actions, but at least it's a step in the right direction to show that we don't have to obey to the fossil fuel lobbies, and we should start fighting back in a sense, always in a non-violent way. But civil disobedience, I believe, is a way to trigger change. So here we stopped trains at the Neurath coal power plant, one of the most polluting in Europe, and it lasted for a couple of days. We stayed at night, and I was here with my equipment to support the activists. I'm going to skip through I have a lot to show in this talk, also about NFTs and about positive future. So I'm going to show some of these drone images really quickly. A lot of the time, the police is actually trying to stop the activists. Because as you may know, RWE is owned by the government, the German government, at 50%. And those interests have to be protected by the police that also responds to the state and to the London. So it's a bit weird that the police is protecting private interests, but it's a long story. I'm gonna skip that one. So this shot was made with my drone 2 years ago, and this is the kind of very strong imagery that I feel shows an interesting symbol. Here you can see the young activists. They're mostly in their 20s. Some of them are even teenagers, and they're on the green side. And you can see here the police running after them, trying to protect the fossil fuel lobby. So I think those images can convey an interesting message, and can also help telling the story of how the state protects the fossil fuel as opposed to protect the citizen and the future of those young people. Okay, so now I'm going to get a little bit technical to explain how projectors can be used for activism. So I started with very small projectors on a small battery, and I was doing these tiny blurry projections. This was on the European Parliament in Brussels, and these are very small portable projections I would do also on power plants. This is the Mannheim church in Germany, where actually Deutsche Bank and BNP Paribas, the two banks, are funding the coal industry. So I tried like this to do those sort of symbolic images, but it wasn't really bright. So I had to use my technical skills as an artist and as a technologist, and I found much brighter projectors. Here on the right, you can see a big 30,000 lumens projector, and it's really portable. So you can do like much larger. You can basically amplify your message on a larger scale. You would have to make by hand those sort of slides, and this is how it looks in real life. This is something I can have in my backpack. So I joined the protest with Extinction Rebellion in London, and we did this projection on the British Parliament during their 2019 event, I believe. And luckily enough, the press caught some of these pictures, and they were in the newspapers. And for me, always it's a matter of amplifying the voice of activists. Here you can see the setup. I have it's really mobile, portable, and this was on Buckingham Palace. I had just one carry-on case with wheels, and we managed to do this projection for about 2 minutes before the Secret Service protecting the Queen started running towards us. But it's not really risky because there's no damage. It's only temporary and with light, and I believe this is something we should use as artists or projectionists. This is on the King's Palace in Brussels. And this was also, it didn't last very long because the police was running after me, and it was a funny afternoon, but at least we got some interesting pictures, and that always helps amplifying the message. I'm going to pass this one real quick, but the challenge was to do a projection on the main square in Brussels, and there were a lot of police blocking all the entries and checking the equipment. And it was around Christmas time, so we booked a table in a restaurant. We came 3 hours before. We had some Christmas presents and gifts, and actually, if you look on the right side here, it was actually hiding a projector. So of course the police wouldn't open the gift because it would be so rude. So we managed to set up here, and I had my equipment as like gift boxes. That was really fun. This was a quick test the day before, and during the big event we had this projection on for 2 or 3 minutes, and we were lucky enough to be in all the news media opening the journal, sometime even live on TV, on national TV. So actually the impact of this very small kit, projection kit, could be felt on national TV, which was interesting. But it still wasn't bright enough. And as a nerd, as a geek and a technologist, I love exploring different technologies. So I started doing laser projections. And also I started at the same time 2 years ago to support Fridays for Future, especially in Germany and in Belgium. They're doing really a great work to question the fossil fuel lobbies, etc. So lasers also look very futuristic in a sense. It's not a new technology, but it helped me doing larger projections as well. This is also the back of the Neurath power plant in Germany. And by creating those images, I can, again, the idea is to amplify the message here with Ende Gelände. This was the Gasfeuerlöschfrei protest that Ende Gelände did 2 years ago. You can see a lot of people here in the corner. It's actually 2,000 protesters, and they were stuck and they were taken by the police into prison for the night. And I was actually in tears, seeing so much injustice and so much violence. There's also a lot of violence from the police beating children, literally. So I was so sad and in tears that I got my laser projector and started this series of projections. And it was really exciting to hear actually the protesters from down the mine, because you can hear maybe a few seconds.
Ein Kohl, nur das hier ist ein bisschen weg. Und das A.
So that day I understood that technology and projection and my work as an artist could not just be to amplify their voice, but also to bring some support on site during protest. So this is actually a picture we took last night. It was at the Neurath power plant. And this is the logo of Ende Gelände projected on. This is actually, I think it's the 5th most polluting plant in Europe. I think the air pollution and the fine particles it sends and the CO2, and it's all really a disaster. And that's why it's such an interesting symbolic place. So instead of waiting for the lobbies to push and to corrupt our politicians, I think it's a good thing to actually go ahead and not stay passive, wait for their destruction, but actually go and protest at those locations. For me, it's very, very important. Another meaningful projection for me was this, it was also last night, and this is a strong message, RWE Coal Mafia, but this is actually many years of feedback that I got from people who got expropriated, and they explained me how the ties between the politicians in NRW and the lobbies are so, those ties are really strong. Just as an example, there's a group focusing on RWE shareholders, and actually the mayor of Essen, Thomas Kupfen, is a member of the supervisory board of RWE, and I think he also owns something like 8 million shares of RWE. So this is just insane that politicians make profit and make money when the villages are being destroyed. So this is why I'm using such a strong language, but this is actually not my own words. This is people who've been persecuted by RWE over the years. And this is the end now about those projections. I'm going to skip to NFTs and to more positive future. But this is the logo of Lützerath and Alle Dörfer bleiben. Those are small groups that are trying to prevent the destruction that is happening right now. Autodesk is a software company that I'm in fight with because they provide the software for the baggers and to operate the mine. So I did this website, autodesk.earth. Have a look. It's all this drone footage that you will see there. And I'm asking the CEO of Autodesk to stop providing software because they pretend to be like super green and they do a lot of greenwashing, but actually they support the largest source of CO2 in Europe. So this is something that must end as soon as possible. When I discovered this story of the tech companies, and because they're doing so much greenwashing, I discovered what's called techno-optimism. And techno-optimism is this idea that technology is going to save us. It's this idea that technology will, fix the problems, not really by addressing the CO2 emissions, but by, providing technologies that would solve magically the issue. And there are three sort of ideas pushed by techno-optimism. I call them the three carbon tech fantasies. It's carbon offset, carbon credit, carbon capture. This is used by the fossil fuel industry to pretend that we can reach net zero. But actually, when you look at the numbers, it just doesn't work and never will. The largest carbon capture plant that just opened in Iceland a few weeks ago can capture 11 tons of CO2 per day, and Garsweiler emits 270,000 tons of CO2 per day. And this plant on the top, it's actually 50% of the capacity in carbon capture. So you would need 25,000 of those places, and you wouldn't even cancel Garsweiler and Embach. So that's why I believe that those sort of carbon offsets, carbon credit, etc., it's just a distraction. It's not an actual solution. Now I'm gonna, as I said, so this was a projection to pressure Autodesk and tech companies to quit fossil fuel, and I'm also trying to bring those pictures and those images to different places. This was the posters of a festival I did last year. So you had those posters of Ende Gelände all around the city, I think in like 120 locations. So in a way, people can start learning about those places and the destruction. I also made a film. It's called Slow Violence, and it's about the coal mining struggle, and it's been exhibited in Madrid this year, and actually was seen by 80,000 people. So I think film and drone imagery can be a powerful way to convey a message. I'm gonna skip. Oh, I can't skip. But basically, those images, it shows the beauty of nature, the beauty of clouds, and what I call the sublime. It's actually a movement in art called the sublime. It was also pushed by the romantic painters of the 18th century, like Caspar David Friedrich, that you may all know. And I think there's an interesting potential in this, for those images to tell a story. So if you're interested, this film will be streamed on a TV channel called cop26.tv tomorrow night, online at, I think, something like 9 p.m. And you can also follow my projection work on this URL, and I will continue sharing some of the actions I'm doing. And if you want to help me, by example, with Autodesk, by pressuring them, that this is a great place where we can exchange and connect. Okay, Now I'm going to talk to something completely different. I know your program is also about economic models, and this is something I've been thinking a lot over the past years, and the sustainability of our practice. This is a sample of the projects I've been doing in the past decade. It's a lot of projects, and some of them were shown only once for 15 minutes sometimes. Here, I think I've got some statistics. So since 2007, I worked on about 90 new projects. That was last year, so now I think I'm closer to 100 projects. And 65 of them were shown to few people only once. So when you think about all the work it requires, all the computer renders, and sometimes many international flights, this is a really, really non-sustainable practice for an artist. So what I try to do now is to make projects that can be shown several times over and over and over again. So it means that the consumption of electricity and all the costs are then not just for one screening, but hopefully to be seen by many, many, many people. And it's not so easy, but this is something we started 3 years ago. So now we have a lot of boxes at the studio with the projects, and those boxes are ready to be shipped, or sometimes we could even send a link to a festival. And last month we had actually 4 installations and exhibitions running at the same time in 4 different countries and locations, and there was not a single flight involved. So it means that it's possible actually to show more projects, to be all around the world with no kerosene involved. So yeah, it's still a work in progress, but I believe I'll be able to show projects very far without using planes. Okay, so now as kind of a controversial topic, but also something exciting. By now you've probably heard about NFTs. It stands for non-fungible tokens, which is a horrible cryptic name. It's basically a way to guarantee the provenance of a digital file. Imagine a digital artist like me. I was producing a lot of artworks, files, and video files and code sometime, but there was no way for me to sell it to a collector, because it could be, by default, digital could be copied and pasted easily. So I couldn't sell a file because the file could be recreated and sold somewhere else. So there was no economic model. But now with NFTs, you can actually guarantee that a video was issued and owned by an artist, and maybe it has a limited edition. So a few months ago, I did a release of 6 artworks, which are simple aesthetic research on the Platonic solids. I won't go too deep into this, but you see here some of the works. And I was very excited to explore this new platform for collectors, and it went sold out. So super cool, new source of incomes. So that was very exciting. But then I realized after doing some research that the electricity consumption was for Ethereum NFTs was insane. You can see here my electricity consumption. And here in just 10 seconds, I sort of burned more electricity than 2 years of studio consumption. So the one thing to remember and to keep in mind is that Ethereum, these new cryptocurrencies, like Bitcoin, it's completely non-efficient, and it consumes a lot of energy. It's wasting a lot of resources. So I decided to stop using it because electricity, the crypto infrastructure relies on coal and fossil fuel still now. So I did a lot of press around this with the New York Times, with Wired. And luckily enough, there are alternatives. So I won't go into details right now, but if you are interested in NFTs, if you are an artist and you want to give it a go, look for clean NFTs. These are energy efficient solution for NFTs. So Tezos is a new currency that you should use if you want to release artworks. This is what I've been doing for a year now, and it's actually something like 1 million times more efficient than Ethereum. Ethereum, maybe sometimes you see ETH, that stands for Ethereum, and that this is what we should avoid. I'm going to skip through because it's almost an hour. It's been almost an hour. So with my partner Juliette, we created an initiative called the FEN to bring people away from Ethereum into more responsible NFTs. And we had the support of so many artists and really, really incredible, amazing artists that have really strong ethics and that supported the project. So now this platform, Hikenunk, is one of the major platform and it's doing better than Ethereum. So it means sometimes with good ethics, you can actually move things around. I'm going to skip through because I have way too many slides. Now I sell drawings as NFTs, and I'm really excited also to be able to sell projections as NFTs. So what I do basically is I produce the work in my studio, like all the time, and then I put it on the blockchain, on the Tezos blockchain, and a collector anywhere in the world can actually buy this artwork and put the code on his computer and projector, and so you can have a projection mapping inside your home and also secured on the blockchain. The blockchain part is a guarantee for the collector that there's only one edition. So no one else can actually make a copy because if you check on the blockchain, you see this artwork was created by me, and then you can see who the collector is. I hope that makes sense. It's not an easy concept, NFTs. So maybe in the Q&A, there will be more questions. This is a new series of NFTs I'm working on. It's also based on projection on prints. And I believe the potential for real life objects on the blockchain can be interesting. This is a new projection I'm working on. It's completely generative. It's made by code and animated by code, and it's also released as an NFT. Okay, so final project just for a couple of minutes. I believe we are at the end of the fossil fuel era. We need to turn around and we need to create a better vision of the future than those dystopian films that I mentioned so many times. So we started with Juliette during a residency in Iceland, a project that we called How Many Trees to Make a Forest. It was in nature, and we used technologies to scan the soil and to scan the trees and to understand the location. So with this technology, we could make an audit of how many trees were there, how many grass, and we understood better the location. We used the drone as well to do a 3D scan of the place, as you can see here. And what you see on the right picture, those colors, are an imaginary forest. It's the one that, of course, doesn't exist, but it's something we invented as artists in our minds. And once the idea exists in your mind, then it's the first step to make it happen in real. So we actually bought 300 trees, 400 trees even, and we spent a couple of days planting those trees to transform our imaginary forest into a real one. So we use the potiputki, which is this funny tool. You stick it into the ground, you put the tree, and it takes like 10 seconds, and your small tree is now ready to live forever in this location. To also imagine our forest, we drew it. So we used watercolors to draw every single of those 400 trees, so to make our imaginary even stronger. And this is something I want to push, the sort of imagining something positive in the future. And as soon as you start doing a drawing or imagining it, it's already a good step in the right direction. Those are the pictures of the trees 1 year after they were planted. They're still here, they're in good shape, and we hope the forest will be here someday. I think it will take about 30 years when those trees grow. This will actually offset our return flights for the residency. So unfortunately, it shows that carbon offset with trees, the time frame is just too long and makes no sense. The return flight was just 7 or 6 hours in and out. and it will take 30 years to cancel those 6 hours. So it makes no sense to rely on planting trees. I think we should plant trees, but this shouldn't be an excuse to keep polluting. Real quick, this was one of our project in public space called Constellation. It's a projection on water particles. And it's really interesting scale. It can be shown to thousands of people, but it does use a lot of electricity. So we've been working on a low-tech version, actually, that we developed at the studio. And here you can see some images shot in Barcelona and here in France. And basically, we are developing a system that uses just a 12-volt pump, as opposed to many kilowatt-hour. So it's taking time, but I believe all the projects from the past can be made and remade with low technology, with low tech. And this is going to be my last slides, my final slides. Also, we're trying to bring projects in nature, not just in cities, in black boxes, and in museums and galleries, but also in the middle of forests. And hopefully, my dream in the near future would be to use the light from the sun to make projections, actually. So here, this prototype we made uses the water from the mountain. It uses the power from the sun because we use the solar panel. So during the entire day, it charges the battery. And then at night, we can also use those other projectors. So we were off the grid. That was a lot of different things. Thank you so much again for letting me open the event, the HoloLab. I hope I wasn't too long. And I'm really happy now to take questions and maybe to continue the conversation with you all.
Yes, thank you so much. That was very interesting and inspiring. I love the tool which you use to plant trees. It looks great, amazing, as do your projections too. I didn't see any questions in the chat, so I just remind, if you have any questions, please use the chat, and we will use the last 8 minutes we have before the break to ask them here. Afterwards, you will have the opportunity as well to meet Joanie Lemercier directly in GABA and ask your questions directly. I don't know, maybe I start with one question, which of course crossed my mind when you were talking about clean NFTs. I know it's a very complicated matter, but could you maybe describe the difference of the NFTs to the ones which are based, for example, on Ethereum?
Yeah, it's a tricky topic because it's super technical.
Yes.
But I'll do my best to make it easily understandable. Even NFT, just the word itself is like is very weird, non-fungible token.
Yes.
So basically, cryptocurrencies and the blockchain is not cryptocurrencies. The blockchain is actually a tool to secure data. Okay, so the whole idea is to have a database that is completely secure. So that's what the blockchain does. So when you have a secure database, then you can do maybe finance use, because your database can actually secure transactions. So that's why cryptocurrencies appeared, because you can have currencies with values secured by the blockchain. So you don't need to rely on a bank. You don't need to rely on computers of Visa or MasterCard to do transactions. You can use the blockchain itself as a matter of having transactions. And this is also great for artworks, because you can put your artworks on the blockchain, and then a collector can collect a piece from you, and it's real, it's secure, etc. So that was after this introduction. You can understand how important it is that the blockchain is really secure. It must be like impossible to hack. And to make this possible, to secure the blockchain, there are like algorithms, which are basically very complex puzzles that computers are solving. And because the puzzles are so complex, no hacker or no other computer can break the code. Okay, so there are different types of algorithms. One is called proof of work, and it's very inefficient. Proof of work is what Bitcoin and Ethereum are based on. So to imagine proof of work, imagine a big room full of computers. Imagine 1,000 computers in a big room, and they're all consuming a lot of electricity because they're all running at full speed, doing those puzzles 24/7 all the time. And they're all competing with each other. So those 1,000 computers, they're trying all to solve one single puzzle. And at one point, maybe after 1 day, after 5 days, or after a week or more, one of those computers will find the solution. And this computer will add a block on the blockchain, and so it creates the blockchain. The blockchain is a chain, is a database. And now you can imagine the 999 other computers, they've been working for nothing. All the work is lost because they were just competing, and the competition, of course, is a big waste. It's an interesting analogy, but so you're wasting basically 99% of electricity, just serves no purpose. So it's wasted. So this is why it's insane to base a blockchain on this technology. I think it was important at the beginning, but now we have alternatives. The good alternative to proof of work, the competitive computers, is actually to make puzzles. They're not easier to solve, but they are very different. So now your 1,000 computers, they will all be solving a different puzzle. So there's no competition, and each of them is actually efficient and useful. So each computer serves a purpose, and of course you will use the same amount of, you will still use a lot of electricity, but instead of securing one transaction and one block on the blockchain with proof of work and with Ethereum, then you can secure thousands, if not millions of transactions with the same consumption. So basically, those proof of stake, POS, are so much better. You can actually run, those little computers can be Raspberry Pis. They don't have to be powerful. They can run on a small solar panel. So, and it's very important that as artists, we focus, or we try to bring everyone to proof of stake, because the impact is at something between 100,000 to 1 million times more efficient. So I think it's very important to be reasonable on our energy consumption.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and certainly something you will have to take a closer look at. What I found interesting is as well the way how you track your own ecological footprint. You seem to be very aware and very precise as well of how you use energy. Does this concern about your ecological footprint as well play a role in your artistic work? Do you make it transparent?
I doing my best. So I wrote a blog post about an audit of my consumptions, because for me it's a way to acknowledge the problem, to be transparent about it, and I will have to push further because I haven't done the research yet on each of my individual exhibitions. Let's say I had an exhibition in Madrid for almost 7 months, and they had projectors over there that were running 6 hours to 8 hours per day. And if I want to be completely transparent and go to the bottom of this, I will have to also do this work. And then once I understand exactly the impact, which is the first step, then I can take decisions. I can actually tell the clients or the galleries to avoid certain types of projectors and use LED projectors. Or maybe I can ask them, like the very minimum now is to automate that all computers go to sleep or shut down every night. Because most exhibitions, and this was very common for me forever, was to have computers running all the time. Having screens on, and by only doing those small things like turn everything off when you leave the studio, that's already 10% of electricity saved. So imagine now that if this was actually part of the political discourse to say, okay, from now on, the basic thing is to turn everything off, even the TVs shouldn't be in like sleep mode, then we will start lowering our energy consumption on a global scale. I mean, this could be, we could tax more the waste of electricity, which is mostly by the richer people, because they don't really mind a bill that is 100 euros or 500 euros more over a year, because it doesn't really, they don't mind. But people with less money, of course, they will be more scarce about resources in general, and sometimes even the heating. And so I think this is also a political problem to start thinking about what could be called degrowth, which it doesn't have to be like degrowth doesn't have to be that we go live in caves. This is usually what people oppose. I think degrowth could be just be more reasonable. So we don't. So we lower the consumption every year from now on. I've done it. It's actually easy. It's not even maybe. So now I've reduced by 30% my consumptions over the past years. Maybe when I get down to 50, this is going to be problematic because I will have to find new solutions. So at one point, I will have to invest in solar panels, which I haven't done yet. But that's I would like to be. I would like to not use external electricity for the studio over the next year. For me, that would be good if everything could be generated here. And then the next step is to stop my consumption of gas for the heating system. I have a big studio, and it's really not easy to switch to something else because it's very expensive. But that's going to be a new step as well. And yeah, so far it's not even difficult. Political leaders will say, "Oh, we need growth. We need GOP to go bigger. We need to produce more. We need to consume more." That's a lie. We don't need to, and the future will be much better if we just reasonable. I think could be a sobriety in our consumption could make sense to me.
Joanie Lemercier, thank you so much. I have tons more questions, but unfortunately I'm running out of time. So I would invite everyone in the audience to join Joanie on Gather for further questions. And I will explain this in German now, because I think it's easier. Also für die Fragerunde mit Joanie, für die Q&As, die ja auch angekündigt waren, bewegen Sie sich am besten jetzt dann rüber nach Gather. Und das funktioniert so. Sie klicken da auf der Hauptseite ganz einfach auf die Kachel Campus und dann kommen Sie automatisch dahin und landen in so einer Art Vorraum. Und da gibt es so eine Liste mit Namen, mit so kleinen Avataren daneben. Und da finden Sie in dieser Liste auch Joanie Lemercier. Und dann heften Sie sich einfach an ihn, indem Sie auf Follow klicken, und dann landen Sie bei ihm in der Fragerunde und können dann eben auch Ihre Fragen ganz direkt stellen. Und sollten Sie diesbezüglich Probleme haben, dann können Sie auch jederzeit den Support in Gather erreichen. Hier an dieser Stelle gibt es jetzt eine kleine Pause von etwas weniger als 15 Minuten, 12 Minuten. Wir sehen uns dann gleich wieder um 16:45 Uhr für das Panel Virtuelle Artenvielfalt, Natur digital erlebbar machen. Vielen, vielen Dank. Thank you so much, Joanie. And yeah, I wish you a very successful Q&A session.
Dankeschön.
Bitte. Also dann bis gleich nach der Pause. Um 16:45 Uhr geht es dann hier weiter.